Okay. I'm going to share. Okay, I'm attempting to share Respondents Exhibit 12, and I'd like to move to have this admitted. It's Dane County's Administrative Practices Manual. It's a stay at work policy as of May 2022.
Ms. Bertrand, do you have your muted? Do you have any objection to that being admitted as an exhibit?
No.
Okay.
So, Ms. Peterson, I just, you had mentioned something about, I don't recall your exact words, but about that the light duty work was subject to managers. And so I just wanted to have you look at the second paragraph in section 1 and
Yes.
see if that refreshes your recollection about what the policy says. And if you could just read that paragraph.
The second paragraph says, the purpose of this policy is to authorize managers to use their discretion to ensure that the business of the county is completed even when an employee is temporarily unable to perform all of the essential functions of their jobs. Under this policy, managers are authorized to make temporary job modifications subject to availability and feasibility of modified work as determined by the manager.
And as far as like your understanding of job modifications, what would that entail?
I think some of the examples that were given to me in the past were things like, you know, if you usually have a bucket of animal feed that you weigh out and it's supposed to be 20 pounds, if you have a lifting restriction of, you know, 10 pounds, that you should certainly be allowed to use 2 buckets and do it that way, instead of thinking that the only way that you can complete the task is to use a single 20-pound bucket. So, you know, accommodations like that were some of the examples that I've been told in the past. But yeah, I think that's.
Can the modifications include assigning someone to an area outside their typical duties?
Yes.
And do you ever deal with employees who have workers' comp restrictions?
Yes, pretty often.
And do those workers always stay working in the zoo area, or do they sometimes work, are they sometimes assigned, depending on the restrictions, to an area outside of the zoo?
In my history, there's been at least 3 other employees that have had work-related injuries that have been assigned outside the zoo in other county departments.
And did any of those people have lifting restrictions, to your knowledge?
At least one of them. We had talked about an individual earlier. The other 2.
Which individual?
No, that was Marley. But the other 2, they were placed in other county departments temporarily before I was a manager. So I know that they went someplace else because of an injury, but I don't have any other details about what the nature of it was.
Should we object to that because she doesn't know? I feel like we should object to that because she doesn't know. And also, I don't believe Marley did go work anywhere else. So if you don't know,
you're not testifying right now. Sorry.
We object.
Well, she's objecting. So for the Marley one, she was testifying based on her personal knowledge. You can obviously address it on a cross-examination if you feel like that's not correct.
Okay.
For the other ones, I mean, she did state she doesn't know anything about those other instances that she believes occurred before her time.
So at the May 10th meeting, or pardon me, let me back up. Strike that. How did Ms. Bertrand respond to being presented with the stay at work program at the May 10th meeting?
My impression is that she didn't think it applied to her circumstances.
Did she ever tell you that she didn't want to participate in that program?
Yeah, I think in both email form and maybe, verbally in those meetings, something along the lines of, I don't think I should have to go into the stay at work program.
And did she tell you where she would feel comfortable working?
Yes.
And do you recall what you might have told Miss Bertrand about where you thought that she should work during the period of her 15-pound restriction?
Yeah, we had already discussed as a leadership team ahead of time about the 15-pound restriction, and it seemed like the safest place at that point was that she could be helping in guest services and or the carousel, because we did have a vacancy at the time, and there would have been jobs that she could do that certainly shouldn't involve anything over 15 pounds.
And so there was testimony today about an incident that happened at the carousel that may have exceeded Ms. Bertrand's restrictions. Were you aware of such an incident?
Yes.
What happened after that incident?
I believe that my understanding of the operations in the carousel, which I do not oversee, but I'm familiar with from day to day, is that there's usually two people. One person pressing the button that makes the carousel go around, and another person who's taking people's money or, giving them the ticket. And I believe that, maybe Susan previously had been the person pressing the button, and they kind of just swapped and said, okay, you're going to be, the one that's taking the money now.
Well, do you know how it came to be that she may have exceeded a lifting restriction during her work at the carousel?
My understanding is that there was a child that accessed an area that they should not have been able to, and that they were climbing on the carousel animals, and Susan was trying to communicate with the child and figure out, their status as a lost child. And the child chose to climb down, and Susan helped the child. That's my understanding.
And so what happened? Did she have to continue working at the carousel after she reported that incident?
I couldn't recall.
So I am showing this Exhibit 14. That is an email from you dated August 26, 2022, regarding task for Susan Bertrand in the ambassador animal area. And just to see if you look over this email, does this refresh your recollection about Ms. Bertrand's duties after the carousel incident?
Yes, I definitely remember this list and us working on creating it and involving the primary keeper of the area. I just couldn't say like when this email was dated versus when the incident with the child happened, as far as like how quickly a change may have been made.
So I believe by the date that this was the date after whatever the exhibit was about the carousel incident, that was August 25th. Does that match your recollection of?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it does match my recollection. I just couldn't say because Susan was reporting to our operations manager for the times that she was working in the carousel or guest services. I just couldn't say like when the incident was reported or noted or anything else, and kind of how we communicated between our two departments for the next steps for Susan, if that was really the trigger, if it was, you know, in addition to something else, or maybe another person was hired, I'm not sure.
Just for the second part of the same exhibit on it's ERD. Well, yeah, the page on it is ERD 448. Can you explain what the ambassador animal checklist is?
So the ambassador animal area is like one of those animals or areas that I had talked about earlier. Our ambassador animals are the animals in our collection that are out teaching kids and going to zoo to use, and usually considered very handleable animals. So a lot of reptiles or small mammals or invertebrates. And because the guest services desk that was part of Susan's new responsibilities is located inside the ambassador animal area. She was spending a lot of time up there, and because I knew that she had a desire to stay involved and stay, you know, up to date in what's going on in the animal care department, she was always invited to come to the morning meeting where we go over all of the things that are happening in animal areas. And then this seemed like a good way to still give Susan some of that connection that she obviously is interested in having with some animals at the zoo. And this way, by us creating our very clear checklist, then all the things that were on this list were things that we knew would not exceed 15 pounds. So although animals in the ambassador animal area might need their enclosures moved or might need sand brought in to do a deep clean or something, that was not on any of these lists because that would definitely be over the 15-pound weight limit. So by kind of creating a task list for Susan, then everybody, including her coworkers, was clear on what Susan could or could not do in an area, and she wouldn't be in the position of having someone ask her to, please replace that sand or take that water bucket from here to there, and her having to explain that that was outside of her restrictions or be put in a spot that she was feeling compelled to do so.
Did the zoo change Ms. Bertrand's schedule at any time related to her pregnancy?
No.
Did Ms. Bertrand retain her zookeeper position throughout her pregnancy?
Yes.
And that was true even when she was like working in areas outside the typical zookeeper areas?
Yes.
Did Ms. Bertrand's compensation change in any way as a result of her assignment to guest services?
No.
There was discussion of a need that the zoo may have had for someone to work in guest services at the time that Ms. Bertrand had her 15-pound medical restriction. Do you have any recollection of that?
Yes, there was a vacancy because our volunteer coordinator was out on maternity leave.
did you personally make the decision that Ms. Bertrand should work in guest services when she had what turned into a 20-pound restriction?
No, we are always discussing as a leadership team. So that includes the deputy director and the executive director, as well as the 2 zoo managers, and then our operations manager, kind of talking as a team about like what some options could be to reach these accommodations. Where is there a need in the operation, while still respecting the restrictions that had been imposed. And so yeah, there's a few of us that were working together and always sharing a lot of the feedback that we were getting from risk management or employee relations.
That is all the questions that I have for you. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Bertrand, are you ready to do cross-examination of this witness? You are muted.
Thank you. Thank you. I definitely have some questions, but I also wouldn't mind just a very short break. Even 5 minutes would be fine.
Yeah, it'll probably be 5 minutes. Before we do that, Attorney Mullen, I think you referenced respondent 14, but did not move it into
Oh, yeah, I
evidence.
would
Do you
like
want
to
to?
move, well,
It was an email.
I'd like to, what's that?
It was an email, I believe, about the ambassador animal unit.
Yeah, that was exhibit 14.
I believe so.
And then there was the stay at work.
Yeah, the stay at work was admitted, R12. R14, Miss Bertrand, the email about the ambassador animal unit.
That's fine.
Reference. That's fine. Okay. Those 2 will be admitted. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. 3:16. Let me stop the recording. 3:16.
So
1 second. I gotta make sure. All right, we are recording. 3:17 p.m. on February 19th, 2025. Ms. Peterson, you are still under oath. All right. And Ms. Bertrand.
Okay, so Beth, you mentioned that providing me with the new assignments of the ambassador animals was in response to the carousel incident.
no, I think I said I couldn't remember the sequence of events of when the incident happened versus when the new AA animal checklist had come.
Okay, maybe that was the Ms. Mullen commented that it was the 26th. An email was on the 26th, and my email about the incident was on the 25th. But on the first, I apologize, on the first email in regards to possibility of new additional animal related tasks I have as C6 was sent on August 23rd. So that was actually a couple days prior to the incident. Yep, and then I reiterated today was that I had on the 25th when I responded, I said I had to catch her and assist her off the carousel animal. That was on the 25th. So just wanted to clarify that timeline. Let's see.
Is there a
But
question?
yes, but the we had to have a meeting in order to start assigning me into the ambassador animals, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember when that meeting took place?
I do not recall the date. I remember we had some emails going back and forth about people being out because of the holiday and when we could coordinate getting the right people in the room together.
Let's see. And then in regards to the day at work policy, you said that is manager's discretion to offer light duty assignments. So it would be,
Yeah,
would have been. So it would have been up to your discretion to allow me to work to continue to work in animal related areas as well.
Yeah, I guess it could go either way.
And you said you're unfamiliar with how many areas that we could possibly accommodate a 20-pound restriction?
I don't think that is an evidence. I
Okay.
object.
How many areas of the zoo do you think could accommodate a 20-pound restriction?
I can't speak for 2022 just because it's been a while, but you know, if we were to look at like today, I think there are a few animal areas like you had mentioned, badger or parts of the aviary that might be able to accommodate that. But in regards to just the lifting aspect, the job itself is not solely lifting all day long. There could be many other responsibilities that need to fall on a keeper at any given moment.
Okay. Did you say you think badger could be an area that someone could work with a 20-pound restriction?
Yeah, off the top of my head.
Penguins?
We don't have penguins anymore.
Well, at the time we had penguins. Do you think penguins would have been an area that someone could have worked with a 20-pound restriction?
I'm trying to remember. I feel like our fish boxes were 20 or 25 pounds, and that would be something you'd need to lift into the freezer every day. But I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, yeah, we actually did not lift the fish boxes. We just filled the
Is-
bucket. So,
Is there a
let's see.
question?
Let's see. Do you think the herpetarium is an area that someone could work with a 20-pound restriction?
Have to think for a second of the kind of responsibilities that someone has there. As far as just lifting something that was 20 pounds, I think that you would be doing that infrequently. It's not that it doesn't happen.
Okay. And then, as you mentioned, with the smaller areas that we've previously discussed, flamingo, you think flamingo could be an area that someone could work with a 20-pound restriction?
Actually, I work in flamingos pretty regularly, and between the feed bags and the buckets of food and the mats, I couldn't say whether they were 20 pounds or not. It's pretty physical area no matter what.
Okay. I believe, do you recall scheduling me in flamingo when I had the 10-pound weight restriction?
What 10-pound weight restriction
I
are
had
you
a 10.
referencing?
Oh, I had a 10-pound weight restriction when I injured my back through work. And I worked in the aviary in Flamingo. I know I was scheduled in that area as well. Okay, let's see. You may have written the schedule or probably oversaw it at that time.
So this is straying outside of what I had, the questions asked her.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think it's still within the scope of kind of what was being asked. She can continue.
Okay, thank you. I mean, as managers, when you're having to schedule keepers with light duty restrictions for work-related injuries, I guess I would assume that a manager would know what areas keepers are allowed to work in with light duty restrictions, since you're scheduling them, workers' comp cases with 10 and 20-pound restrictions. You don't believe that's true?
I object to the question as argumentative.
Yeah, I mean, it is argumentative. Ms. Bertrand, I mean, you can ask specific questions, but that sounds like more of a
Okay.
closing argument type item.
Can I rephrase that as a manager? I mean, I guess, do you feel a manager should know what areas are scheduling someone with restrictions in? What the requirements are when you're scheduling
Yes.
someone with a restriction? Okay. In our first pregnancy meeting, you stated that working the carousel having me work the carousel would make you feel more comfortable. Is that correct?
I did say that.
And did you feel at the time that I had light duty restrictions that you did not need me as a zookeeper?
It wasn't a matter of need. It was whether or not we could follow your restrictions.
Okay, because I thought I'm sorry, but you did feel that you needed me as the volunteer coordinator.
You weren't the volunteer coordinator.
Okay, but it was, okay, so it wasn't, was it discussed that there was a need for me in the guest services area because the volunteer coordinator was on maternity leave?
Yes.
So you felt there was more of a need for me in guest services than working as a zookeeper?
I felt that the working guest services more closely met your restrictions.
But with manager's discretion through the stay at work policy, that allows you to modify tasks, change our job assignments, correct?
Yep.
So as I asked management, if I, needed to join the stay at work program, I could have gone around with restrictions to make diets for the animal areas. That would have been a modification that would require me to join the program because it would be outside of the typical animal routine, but it would still have kept me as a zookeeper. Do you agree that that would be a modification, just having, would that be something that would be left to manager's discretion, is I could have gone around to the different areas and helped the zookeeper team by making diets for everyone?
Object to the form of the question is vague.
I'm going to overrule if the witness can answer. She can do so.
You're right. Moving around the zoo to make diets would be something that we could benefit from, but that's not the zookeeper job in its entirety.
But that's true, but within the stay at work program, that would have been a modification that you could have allowed me to do to continue to work in the animal areas, but not do 100% of my job. I could have made diets with the 20-pound restriction. Correct?
Yeah, I think you probably could have worked around the zoo just making diets. You're on mute.
Thank you. Okay. Do you recall that the zoo paid overtime to zookeepers while I was working in guest services?
Yes,
And that we were hiring LTEs, limited term employees, to work as zookeepers while I was working in guest services?
we've had LTEs for the last 8 years.
And the zoo has created and filled 2 new zookeeper, 0.6 zookeeper positions since 2022.
Correct?
And the zoo created and filled 0.6 zookeeper attendants, one of those positions since 2022.
Yes, there was 2.6
Oh.
zoo attendants and 1.6 zookeeper created.
Thank you for clarifying that. To your knowledge, have they added any positions in the guest services area since 2022?
They have LTEs over there as well, but I couldn't say whether their kind of status quo has always been 1 or 2 LTEs. It's not my area of oversight.
But have they created any additional full-time positions in the guest services area since 2022?
No.
Okay. And as you had stated earlier, we no longer have penguins. Do you feel that we have less animals now than we had in 2022?
Today? Yes.
And less animal spaces with the giraffe building being empty and the penguin building being empty?
I wouldn't say it's even because we added the ambassador animal area as well as more species in other areas. The barns now have turkeys and guinea fowl as well, so it's not exactly an even swap.
Well, the ambassador animal area was created when I was pregnant. Overall, I was just asking if you feel we have less areas to be filled now with penguins being gone, or less work for zookeepers now than in 2022.
I don't feel like we have less
Object
work for
to
zookeepers
the
now.
relevance of this question.
I guess I'm just going back to trying to show as they have stated that they felt that they had more of a need for me in guest services than zookeeping. However, we have not created any full-time or additional positions in guest services, but in the last 2 years, we have created more positions in the animal area, and with less animals, it just shows that we actually, zookeepers always need more help. So to say that we did not need me as a zookeeper, I don't think anyone that works at the zoo would agree with that. So I guess that is what I'm trying to get at.
And I am going to overrule to continue with questioning.
Thank you. Have I been scheduled in Red Barn since returning from my pregnancy?
I couldn't say.
Okay. It was admitted upon in the discovery. I have not. Oh, sorry.
I don't think the discovery was admitted. And that fact hasn't been in oral testimony today.
Okay.
So I object to the
So-
question.
Yeah, I mean, it was more of a statement that I think she's now saying, right? It's not an evidence. So if you wanted to impeach someone with discovery testimony, then you could certainly reference that discovery testimony. But to just say that it was in there or not, there's no way for me to verify that, for example. So generally speaking, you can't just kind of testify to those things on your own,
Okay.
right?
And Beth, you approved, did you approve schedules while Katie was writing the schedules during the time that Mary Schmidt was regularly scheduled less work?
You'd have to give me a time period to reference for Mary's scheduling.
During the time that Katie was a lead keeper and she was writing schedules, were you overseeing those schedules and improving those schedules?
Again, what was the time period? I may have been in the lead keeper or the zoo manager capacity and still creating the schedules on my own.
No, I'm sorry, during the time that the lead keeper Katie was writing the schedules, you were overseeing her when she was writing those schedules and improving those schedules, correct?
Sorry, I still don't know what time period. Katie was a lead keeper for 4-ish years.
Okay, well, I guess the schedules that we see were 2020. In the schedules that I have in evidence are from 2020.
Did I look at them again?
Oh.
Yeah,
Let's
C32.
C32?
Yep.
So is your question whether I
Well,
oversaw?
is there a question pending?
Yes. Did Elizabeth Peterson approve the schedules written by Katie Penyaski?
I do not know if Katie Piankowski was the zoo manager that created this schedule. I see that as the schedule. It looks like many of the ones we've had previously. Laura Weiner was also at the zoo at different times. There's no author on this. I couldn't say who created it. In general, I, as overseeing the animal care department, am also in charge of making sure that the operation is covered. So that includes the schedule being completed.
How much work do you think it would take someone to work how much time do you think it would take someone to work badger flamingo for a day? In general.
I guess it depends on the nature of the day. In general, 4 or 5 hours.
And Mary was regularly scheduled flamingo badger, which is, like you said, about 4 hours of work per day on this schedule.
I'm not sure whether Mary had any sort of restrictions or anything else that was limiting her schedule ability at that point.
Do you remember when Mary retired?
No, I do not.
Do you feel accommodation for me to work with a light duty restriction would have been significantly difficult to implement?
I object to the question as
Yes.
asking for an opinion.
Oh,
I mean,
Okay.
it's,
Yeah,
it was not,
repeat
would've
that
been-
question for me. What she said
Okay.
it would have been.
would have been significantly difficult to implement light duty restrictions for me as a zookeeper. Pregnant
Yes.
zookeeper.
And the witness answered yes.
Was it difficult to write the new area for Eric when he had light duty restrictions in the aviary?
Was it difficult to come up with Eric's routine that Eric could follow that accommodated his restrictions? I wouldn't call it difficult. I guess in my role of deciding what was clear on what he could do.
Would accommodating light duty work for me and my 20-pound restriction have negatively affected the ability of other employees to perform their duties?
Yes.
But you don't feel it was difficult for Eric to have similar restrictions in the aviary?
I recall Eric's being much more temporary, maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
No, he stated his were from November until March. So actually those restrictions lasted quite a bit longer than my 2 months of restrictions.
object, is there a question?
I think she's restating her question.
Okay. I think she was being
Well-
argumentative and making a comment about past testimony, but
Well, I mean, I think she's trying to refresh the witness's recollection who was here for that testimony. So
Mhm.
I understand your concerns, but I'm going to overrule.
Thank you. Were accommodations of light duty work for Eric, did that negatively affect the ability of other employees to perform their jobs?
I couldn't say. I didn't get any feedback of that nature.
Do you think reasonable accommodations of light duty for me as a pregnant zookeeper with a 20-pound restriction would have caused undue hardship for the county?
that was asked and answered.
Oh, that was.
Yeah, I just had a question about, the, Beth, do you remember the time, Susan, raising concerns about, interactions with the public and the COVID restrictions that were in place at the time?
I don't recall that.
But it was fairly well, like as a manager, I mean, everybody had to deal with being aware and being cognizant of potential exposures to COVID in those years. Was that part of your job?
Are you referencing 2022?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody had to be aware of the potential
Yeah.
risks.
And having someone work the carousel, would that put them in more expose them to more interactions with the public than the other work that Susan was requesting?
I mean, I think at that time we were still doing the same social distancing or the same, like whatever precautions were in place for the carousel, we're meeting the CDC or the county guidelines. So whether a zookeeper would ever be closer than 6 feet or whatever the guidelines were, I don't think they would ever be put in a different situation of risk. Keepers were still moving about grounds, giving chats, doing training, interacting with guests, which is part of their job description.
Okay. And so you had mentioned a lot of different jobs that zookeepers do, and in other, in other parts of your testimony that, there was a capacity to sort of pick and choose which jobs could be done. Did any time during all this was going on, it was Susan trying to kind of help define a role that she could do and stay within her zookeeper position with the light restrictions? Was she offering answers to those questions?
I guess it's kind of hard to answer. I remember her saying things like, I think I should be assigned to the aviary, or I think I could do badger. But I don't believe, in the context of I'm working in the aviary and I, need to move an animal that's in a crate. I don't think it was ever like, I will ask someone else to do that for me, or I will, roll the crate on a dolly. Like that wasn't like accommodations. I think that she was suggesting at any point to say, here's how I would make it work.
Okay. Well, the roles that she was suggesting, were they, would you say that they had less interaction with the public than the carousel would?
Yes.
Okay. I believe that's all I had in the clarification, the guest services. Yeah, no, that's all the questions I had.
Okay, I have a couple more. We had discussed animal areas. You said we had about 11 animal areas. 11 to 12 generally. I believe it was 11 at the time, like you said. Do those areas change day to day?
Yeah, based on like sick calls and such. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like the reorganization of the zoo was into 11 areas. But so I was told that I could not work badger flamingo because it was not an area, but say on the weekend those areas would change, right? The 11 areas. How often do you think they're actually scheduled in the reorganization that you guys have created?
These are facts, not in evidence. I don't recall any testimony about reorganization. I mean, there's no foundation.
Okay. In the my first exhibit, that was the email from management talking about reorganizing, excuse me, the animal areas into 11 areas. And so in Beth's testimony, she said that we have 11 to 12 areas generally. And we try to keep people in those areas, is what she had said. However, those areas do change, like, for example, on the weekend, like when we have half staff, correct? People move.
The way that they're combined can change.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I think that is all of the questions that I have.
Alrighty.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
Attorney Mullen, any
Yeah.
redirect?
a little bit. When in 2022, when Ms. Bertrand was pregnant, did she ever provide any medical restrictions related to COVID?
No.
So well, no, strike that. When there was testimony and about Eric Anderson's restrictions in 2023 and 2024, did Eric at that time request to be scheduled in certain areas?
No.
Did Eric work in the areas he was assigned without objection?
Yes.
Ms. Bertrand testified that she had a 10-pound restriction prior to her pregnancy at some point. How long did she have that restriction?
I remember that one being maybe less than a month, as far as like maybe the restrictions got less stringent over time, or there was another doctor's recheck. I think it was about a month.
And did she work in aviary for that entire month?
I don't believe so. In fact, I remember there was discussion about like, I worked in an area and it ended up not feeling as good as I thought it could. So, you know, maybe we should do something else.
And at that time, were you able to accommodate her in the prior incident?
I feel like she was on vacation for most of the time that she was under restriction. So that certainly affected the scheduling too, but I couldn't say for sure. I am certain that Susan was scheduled in more than one area during the time that she had a 10-pound restriction, like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 areas.
Interesting. I could do that then.
When
Right.
just a second. Sorry, I am showing, I've marked it at the bottom as R31. It's a rebuttal exhibit related to there had been a prior exhibit that looks similar to this, but with different dates on it. So Beth, in looking at this, do you see that this is a doctor's note for Susan Bertrand?
Yes.
And that it reflects a date of injury of September 19th, 2021?
Yes.
You see that? And is this the prior injury where she had a 10-pound restriction? Does that date correspond?
Yep. Yes.
And do you see where the box is checked that return to work with no restrictions on 10/12/2021?
Yes.
is that when her restriction ended, or was there anything beyond that to your knowledge?
I don't recall anything beyond that, since the note says return to work with, underlined no restrictions, unless there was a new note issued. I think that was the end of it.
And was she on vacation for a week during this time?
I believe so.
There was testimony that you told Susan she would feel more comfortable working in an area outside the zookeeper areas. What did you mean by comfortable?
Did you say that I would feel more comfortable?
I believe that the testimony was that you would feel more comfortable having her work in another area, not a zookeeper area. What did you mean by comfortable?
So, overseeing the whole department and the operations for all of animal care, I was speaking on behalf of, the responsibility I have for safety here at the zoo, and, not just Susan's safety, but for the safety of others or for the safety of animals. I definitely would feel more comfortable placing her or having her work day to day in an area that I felt much more certain was within her restrictions, rather than kind of towing a line that might put her at some sort of risk to exceed what she was supposed to be doing.
And is that because she expressed additional safety concerns about climbing during the May 10th meeting?
Yeah, she had indicated she had a high risk pregnancy.
That's all the questions I have.
All right. I'll allow a recross, Ms. Bertrand.
Thank you.
Subject to the questioning that was just done.
So, you said you felt more comfortable keeping me out of animal areas because I mentioned I had a climbing concern. But when I reported to you on June 16th, that I had concerns about the carousel working, sorry, excuse me, I think I'm on the wrong thing here. I reported to you working, I had concerns working the carousel, as it was, extremely hot. There was no air conditioning. And also I had to interact with more people, and COVID-19 causing concerns. But do you remember that?
I don't.
Okay.
Is it what you said?
I'm think this is I recopied and pasted this several times, so let's see. June 16th. This is to them is the question. Okay. I don't know. Maybe that's in the meetings. I thought I had it in an email that I sent to management. Expressing concerns with COVID-19. Beth, you said that I worked probably 4 areas with 10-pound weight restriction. That I wouldn't have just stayed in aviary. What areas do you think zookeepers can work in with the 10-pound weight restriction?
The question was whether you worked in multiple areas, and I believe you did. I couldn't say what the areas are without the schedule in front of me for that 10-pound period.
Okay, let's see. Are you saying that there are multiple areas in the zoo where someone could work with a 10-pound weight restriction?
I'm going to object. That wasn't her testimony in the last section that we're doing this redirect on.
Well, we discussed.
Recross.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I think she must be pulling from the discussion about, you had asked about the back injury, but she had a
Yeah.
10-pound restriction, and did she work in the aviary the entire time? It's not exactly
Okay.
the testimony. I will allow a little bit of questioning, though. Go ahead.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Your Honor. That is what I'm referring to. I had a 10-pound weight restriction, and you said you didn't believe that I would have been scheduled in the aviary the entire time. You thought I would have been scheduled in probably 4 different areas. That was your testimony. Maybe I misunderstood or you misspoke. I'm just curious as to what 4 areas of the zoo you think, someone with a 10-pound weight restriction could work.
I think for that short of time, there would be some ability to schedule you in a few different areas, including badger or flamingo or parts of the aviary.
So you would agree that there are multiple areas of the zoo where someone can work with a 10-pound weight restriction?
Object
Or,
to, I mean,
yeah, for the 3 weeks.
So there was, well, I guess she's answering, but there was an objection.
you can go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
All right. I think you said yes for the 3 weeks. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, and for that 10-pound period, I believe you were gone for at least a week of it. So
You feel it's more difficult to accommodate someone for a longer period of time,
yes,
3 weeks versus 2 months.
you didn't have restrictions for 2 months. You had them for much longer.
When you wrote the schedule, this is pertaining to just the areas in the schedule. John worked in herpetarium almost every day for several years.
I'm going to object because I
Correct.
think this is, again, going back to another area altogether.
Yeah, so this one, I don't recall being in this redirect
Okay.
unless I missed it. I know we discussed Eric's accommodations, but
Okay, I think that is all.
all right. Thank you, Ms. Peterson, for your testimony. And
Thank you.
Attorney Mullen, do you have other witnesses?
No, I do not. I will not call my other witness.
All right. Ms. Bertrand, do you have any rebuttal? Oh, I guess before I move to that, so is R31 being moved in as an
Yeah,
exhibit?
I would like to move that into evidence.
And
yes.
then I believe I don't have that in my packet, correct? Since it was a rebuttal document?
No, I
or is it?
can.
Yeah, if you can email it to me and
Sure.
then to the complainant, I can add it
Yes.
officially to the packet. Any objection, Ms. Bertrand, to R31? That was that doctor's note regarding your back injury.
Nope.
Okay, so it'll be admitted. And then respondent is rested. Ms. Bertrand, do you have any rebuttal evidence to present? So this would be new evidence in response to what the respondent presented. So not like things that you felt like you should have covered but missed. You know, these are
Yeah.
new things that would have been brought up.
Not at this time, no.
All right. Well, then we can close testimony. And then I believe the parties indicated they wanted to do post-hearing briefs. Correct?
Yes. Yep.
All right. So let me go ahead and try to set some dates. We can do simultaneous briefing. Are the parties going to want access to this hearing recording
Yes.
prior to that? So let me bake in some time. I will say I'll give myself a week. It just takes some time to download and then it get transferred to you and it'll be sent by a WeBox link. So if I say a week, then we can, from that point, February 26th, decide how much time we might need. How much time do the parties think that they need for the first round? So both parties will submit at the same time their initial brief, and then both parties can respond to that brief. I guess I could start with you, Attorney Mullen, if you've given some thought to.
I guess I would request to March 28th.
What are your thoughts, Ms. Bertrand, about that? 1, 2, 3, 4, basically 4 weeks.
That's fine.
That work? Okay, so
Sure.
Friday, March 28th. You can submit that by email or the case portal if you have it. You can also mail it or fax it. If you mail it or fax it, it must be received by 4:30 p.m. before our offices close. If you email it or do it to the case portal, you have until 11:59 p.m.
Okay.
Responses to that brief, how much time after March 28th for the response?
I think 2 weeks would probably be enough for me. Where does that put the Friday the 11th of April?
Yeah, how does that sound for you, Ms. Bertrand?
I'm going to be unavailable for part of that time, so I would probably have to request until the April 25th.
I don't object.
Okay, then we can do it April 25th for response briefs. There will be no reply briefs, so both parties can submit that initial brief by March 28th, the response by April 25th. All right, anything else we need to address on the record?
No.
All right, let me go ahead and stop the recording.